All right. I'm gonna start, and then if more people come later, they can come. Okay. So, my name's Kevin. I'm gonna be talking about Ansible and how it's a tool that you can use to set up your server automatically. Essentially, just write it once and then deploy it to as many servers as you want. Deploy them in a cluster, whatever. Um, and how I think it's the tool that you might actually use because I tried several configuration management tools like this, like Chef and Puppet and stuff, and shell scripts, and I didn't really keep using them because it was just too complicated or annoying. Right. This isn't true anymore because ever since I added this slide, I've been remembering to say my name. So it's doing its job. My handle on Drupal.org and like most social media and stuff is Wiz1 Solutions. I maintain the fill PDF module on Drupal.org. Um, I like languages as well, so I'm learning Slovene at the moment. All right, so what is Ansible? Ansible describes itself as an IT automation tool, meaning that you can use it to automate IT tasks like setting up new servers, routine maintenance things. Like I know someone uses it to do Drupal updates on a number of servers, like rolling updates. So they just do one, and then when that goes, they go to the next one, and so on. And then if one fails, they can get notified about that and see what went wrong, and then fix it before they run it on the rest of the servers. Um, it can also replace shell scripts to that end. So if you have a really complicated bash script, it might be easier to just rewrite it with Ansible. Um, it might be a little easier to read and maintain that way. And also then it lets you run it on multiple servers at once or in sequence, however you need to. And most interesting for me are deployment scripts and migration and like new site launch scripts. I use this for deploying my site. Probably ran it 2 or 3 days ago to deploy like a security update for the legal module which came out, um, and just a couple other updates that I wanted to put in. Uh, and I also used it when I was moving from like my old Ubuntu 10.04 server a couple of years ago, which when it reached end of life wasn't supported anymore, to a CentOS 6 server, which was supported like as long as I cared. Uh, I used it so I could automatically basically change the database information like really quickly, and then copy the database to the new server. Basically, I had like 10 seconds of downtime maybe, versus doing it manually where it would take a few minutes and maybe I'd mess up. And the beauty of Ansible, well, we'll see. We'll see that later. I don't want to run out. I'll run out of things to talk about. Right. So getting into what it looks like. Can anybody tell me what's happening here? And it's not a trick. Anybody? Going once, going twice? Like the not a trick is that you can literally just read the names of the tasks. This is so Ansible uses YAML. It's kind of like Drupal 8 configuration files, and each one of these sort of array elements is a task. So this is just maybe the variables throw you off a little bit, but it's just creating a group, creating a user, and then the third part's a little tricky. It's changing the profile so that when they log in, it'll put them in a particular directory. In this case, the web root. So if I log in with this user, I can just run drush right away instead of having to change directories, but without changing the actual home in the user profile. So we'll look more at that in a bit. um, yeah. So then, why might we want to use a tool like Ansible at all? Um, I think one of the most powerful reasons is that it creates documentation by existing, because you have to write the set of steps to do to set up your server, and it has this name field, so you can name each task, and that in itself is documentation. So you can look at it and you can see, oh, okay, this is how I set up the server. These are all the things I have to do. These are all the weird things that I have to fix, and it saves you from having to remember how to do it or having to like write it in Evernote or OneNote or I don't know what, and then remember where it was and distribute it to other people and hope that other people can understand you and whatnot. Because this is it's code as well, so it actually runs. So even if you write, even if you just write like foobar on all your names, it'll still work. It just won't be very useful or as useful in terms of explaining why it's doing what it's doing. And to that end, it makes the setup shareable, so you could use Ansible to make a developer environment. You could use Ansible to make a developer environment, for example, and then distribute it to your developers so that they can just get going. I know there was some WordPress company that was doing this as well. I don't know if they were using Ansible, but they were doing something similar, maybe Shell. And that's just to the Y configuration management in general point. So they would just run a command, and then they'd have the company's environment set up, and then they could just work without having to like deal with all of the machine-specific stuff. Some people are on Mac, some people are on Windows, and whatnot. Because Ansible does run on Windows. I haven't used it much on Windows, but I know it does run on Windows. So it's possible to set up Windows machines as well. And the point that I wanted to hold off on before, in terms of when I would say I'll tell you later, it's the lets you test locally part. This is really nice for things like migration and deployment and stuff, and new servers. Because for my server, I actually have a copy in Vagrant, like locally. So I more or less know what's going to happen before I deploy it. Like if I'm going to start getting weird Drupal errors when I clear the cache or try to run database updates, I can test that in locally first and fix it before I put it on my live server and break everything. So that's very useful, especially for like that migration script I was talking about, because that's kind of something that you run once and you want it to work the first time you run it. So it's very useful in that sense. It's really time consuming to set up a local copy of something yourself and then to keep it in sync with the server. But in an automated fashion, it's pretty easy. Like you just have to change a couple things, which Ansible lets you do. And we'll see some examples of that later. So this is kind of my joke that if the new person of the company or the intern or whatever destroys the server, you can just rebuild it. Right. And then, so then another potential question is, okay, well, why Ansible? Why not one of the other tools? And again, I think that the most important thing is to use something. Even if it's not Ansible, even if it's Salt or Puppet or whatever, just don't use nothing. That's the most important thing. But the reasons that I like Ansible over Chef or Puppet or deterministic run order tools, for whoever that makes sense for, is that it's pretty easy to read. It's just using YAML. It's you don't. I mean, you do have to learn how it works, but you don't have to learn another DSL or language. And it runs in order, which I find in most cases is actually fine, because usually I know what order I need things to run in, and I can just write it that way. And then if something breaks, I just move it around easily and fix it. Like, I think that the other tools that figure out the optimal run order for everything are kind of solving a problem that most people don't have most of the time, and in itself can create problems as well. So it's just like, which one do you want to fix, basically? Either way, you have to fix stuff. Also, it's easy to get going because it's agentless, so I think it uploads like little Python programs over SSH or something. But anyway, you don't need like a server on the other machine, or you don't need to bootstrap the other machine to start spinning it up. You can just run Ansible, and it will connect over SSH, and it'll work. I think you need Python, but most operating systems come with some version of Python that will work with Ansible. So usually it just works. Or maybe you need like a little shell script to get it to work, but I haven't needed that as far as I remember. And also now it's owned by Red Hat, so it has money. They bought it. I don't even remember when they bought it because really nothing changed except, I guess, the project lead, which was good because I think like I think like it was like October of some year, maybe 2 years ago they bought it. And then in April I read about it and I'm like, oh, never noticed. So they're doing a good job. Okay, why not Docker? um, and again, I think Docker's fine. You can do a lot of the same stuff, just in sort of a different way. You could use DrCompose to set up the parts of your setup and have your Docker files setting up the Docker containers and everything. And you mostly get the same benefits. You have to do it a little bit differently. It's just different. Probably the biggest question though is like everyone's like, is Docker ready for production? Like I'm not really hearing that it totally is yet. Maybe in some cases, and maybe if you want to pay Docker a lot of money for what is it, Docker Enterprise or something, then they're like, okay, yeah, then it'll be okay because you're paying us money. But I haven't heard that many other cases. Maybe Kubernetes was sort of okay, but I don't remember. Anyway, this is sort of an open question still, and Ansible works, and also it can provision Docker, as our friend here tells us. Right. So, reuse. The concept of reuse in Ansible is implemented with these things called Ansible Rolls. So, as I say for Drupal, you can basically just Google Geerling guy and whatever you want. He wrote most of the ones for Drupal. And this is how it looks as an example. You just say role, the name of the role, and then you can specify variables for it. And another neat feature of Ansible you can see me using here is something called Ansible Roll, which is good for, especially for sort of internal projects. You can basically encrypt and commit credentials. So you're not committing raw credentials into your repository, but you still have them. And then you just need to give the person the password, the decryption password, and then they can just run it without having to actually decrypt the files. So that's useful because then I could just use a variable for the password, and I can show you this without showing you my MySQL root password. And I can like show you my whole deployment script later without exposing any credentials. So Ansible Vault is useful. I didn't use it at first. I just had credentials right in Ansible, but then I got smarter. Right. So I'm gonna actually. That's sort of the slides. I'm gonna see if I can. I heard some of these computers have PHP Storm on them. I don't know if these do. Let's see. If not, then we can use the slide version. I'll just try to zoom. Nope. Yeah, I'll just use the slide version. This is a little small. Let me see. I think it was Windows Plus to turn on Magnify. Okay. Cool. I might move around like that. Is this readable? Anyone can't read? Okay, cool. Right. So this is yeah, we'll just kind of move around there as we talk. This is my actual deployment playbook. Playbook is like the file that you run in Ansible that does stuff for PhilPDF service, which is a site that I run. So whenever I'm going to deploy, I just run this. So I thought to explain a little more Ansible, we could just look at this a little, go through it. So the very top has these three dashes. You see them here, and that is just like to start the YAML file. Those are required. And then the first level in a playbook is called the play. So this is saying that like all the tasks and whatnot that are under here are part of this deploy tagged PhilPDF service version play, and that's probably the only one in this because this is a pretty simple playbook. Then these vars files are variable files, so settings basically for like file paths and credentials and all of this. And then the hosts is the servers that I want to run it on. For this particular one, I use a variable called target, so that this is kind of a safeguard, so that I don't accidentally run it on like production when I don't want to. I have to actually specify the target on the command line when I'm running it. And if I don't, then it'll just fail. So it makes sure that I usually know what I'm doing with it at least. And then the tests, which is the main stuff. And then because it's a deploy script, you see I have this don't run as root task where I fail if I try to run it as root, because this should be run as my web user, since it's mostly just updating code and clearing cache and things like that in Drupal. So that's really useful in case I forget to. And I have to specify that user on the command line as well, but it's pretty easy. Right, and then so this is pretty typical deploy script. I have to, and for me it's really useful because stuff like this is very annoying when deploying, like just with Git, for example. You forget to change the permissions on your settings.php, and then you get problems. Like it won't check out properly. It's like, oh, permission problems. And then you have to go back, and then you have to do it again and figure out what happened. Maybe it checked out halfway, and then you look at Git status, and you have all this red stuff. This, I could just set the permissions, make it writable for like 30 seconds or something while it does all this other stuff, and then automatically secure it again, like we'll see. And then this part here with prod and dev is a good example of how I separate local and production. In this case, I just check for if it's parallels or not, because I use parallels locally. If it's not, then I actually clone it, and then this, because it said tagged version, I'm using a specific variable where I actually tell it which tag to use, which is nice because then I can run Ansible without updating the code until I want to update the code. If for some reason I want to update the server stuff without changing the code for a bit, and then do the code separately. So this is just doing Git. And locally, I'm just doing Git pull because I don't need. I already have I have like a shared folder locally that has the code in it, so that I can work on the code while I'm working on the playbook. So I don't need to reclone it locally. Although, let me see. Yeah, you can see I have another variable, simulate production, and if I set that to true, then it will actually clone it. And like, I'd probably use that occasionally if I'm not sure if something's going to work, and I want to do it inside of the virtual machine, and then in my vagrant file, blah blah blah, I don't share the folder, and then it's even closer to production. So I can do all these little tricks with Ansible to test before I deploy, and ideally not break things. Right, so then we're getting to the end of this first screenshot. So then after doing that, then I can, you see I update the settings.php. If I put anything new in it, then it gets written out there. Like if I added some module and I want to set I add some mail module and I want to set the API key or something, and I could put it in my Ansible Vault and then just put it straight into my settings template. This .php.j2 thing it's like a Jinja2 template. It's like a Python thing that Ansible uses. You don't have to know Python though. It's just the templating language. A little bit like Twig, I guess. And when you're using a template file, you typically end it with that extension, and then it will process the template and it will save it to in this case, settings.php. And then I can immediately make it read-only. So that happens pretty fast, and it reduces the time that my server is potentially vulnerable because of settings.php being writable to just as long as the script takes to run instead of a few minutes when I'm doing it manually. So that's the first half. Can you still read that? Zoom in more? I'll zoom in more anyway. Because it's not that. This one isn't as wide. Okay. And then there's some other just neat stuff that I've sort of added over time when I realized that it was useful. this one looks complicated, but really it's just running a few drush commands. The main thing here is this with items line. So that lets you basically do a task several times with different arguments or yeah, different arguments basically. So and then this should here is like telling it what directory to run in. So in the web root, because drush will not work unless you're in the web root. So then this one just runs like drush, and then I remove a couple variables that shouldn't be set, because this is just like if you're using the module yourself on your site, you might set these. But I'm also using it to run a server-side thing, and I don't need those because I'm running it locally, which is what the third one does. It makes it use what it should be. And then I can turn off development modules if I turn them on for some reason, because they shouldn't be enabled on production. And then I remove changelog so people can't see what version of Drupal I'm using. Oh, which I didn't. Somehow I didn't do that the other day, and that's why I ran this script recently, because I was like, someone was asking me what version of Drupal is this site, and I'm like, just go to look at changelog.txt. See, it's Drupal 6.37 or whatever. And I'm like, but if you go to my site, you won't see it. And then I go to my site and I see it. So that was embarrassing. But now it's not there anymore. So then I do that. It's really nice because I can like automate all of these security steps that they tell you to do. Don't have changelog, keep your settings, permissions good, all of these things. And I can just do it automatically every time I deploy. And then, yeah, run database updates. In this case, I tell it not to clear the cache because I do that myself later if I need to. And then I can do registry rebuild if I pass a particular argument on the command line to tell it to do a registry rebuild. I don't normally do it. Blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, and then if the code changed, then I clear the cache. So that's why I don't do it before. That is basically my deploy script. This is probably says push. Turn this off. My exit magnifier. Windows, where's the minus? Where's the minus on a cursor keyboard? It's not next to plus. It's probably here. Yeah, here we go. Great. Questions? Any question is okay. Even like, what? Who understood nothing? Okay, that's good. That's good. Anybody use Ansible already? You no. Chef, Puppet, Bash, half Bash. Anybody automate their server deployments at all? Already? Yeah. What do you use? Symphony console. Like, are you using the question thing or just? Hmm. So PHP basically. Hmm. Are you using Thing or something? Okay. Yeah, this is like some build tool in PHP. I think might be interesting. They probably have Composer by now. But yeah, maybe worth looking at. It does use XML, that's why I never really looked at it. So that's pretty cool. Other questions? Yeah. I mean, the script I was showing is mine. I use it for deploy, and yeah, I use it for server setup as well. The whole server. Yeah, no, it's been pretty good right now, but I used it even before I went from the old Ubuntu to CentOS. So it was convenient because some roles work with both of them already. So in that case, I don't have to do anything. I just have to fix the things that are Ubuntu specific, or when there are roles that only work with Ubuntu. You only work with Ubuntu, then I have to find one that works with CentOS. But I was able to. It was really useful because I already knew what I had to do on the server. I just had to sort of convert the playbook a little bit, and then it worked. disable SE Linux. Which I shouldn't do, but I just can't deal with SE Linux. Other questions? I think there's plenty of time. You sure? Okay. Yeah. Well then, that's it.